Hi, everyone. Welcome to Prevention Education, the podcast that teaches you everything about prevention. Thanks for listening, and let's get started. Everyone, welcome back to another Prevention Education episode. As always, I am Kylie, and today I have Whitney on with me. So Whitney, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. So my name is Whitney Thompson. I'm a prevention specialist with Preferred Family Healthcare in the prevention department. Just a little tidbit, I cover the 9 counties on the northwest side of Missouri, and the very tippy top of Missouri. So anywhere ranging from Atchison County down to kind of like that Clinton County and around the circle. That's kind of where I'm at. So
yes,
just kind of put that out there.
Yeah, if you're in any of those areas, if you're listening and you're in any of those areas, definitely feel free to hop over to our website, pfh.org/prevention, and message Whitney if you have any questions about that area. So we're going to get started with our intro question. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't think too much about this question. And this morning when I was looking at my options for breakfast, I thought of this question. So if you were a breakfast food, what breakfast food would you be?
Oh my gosh, that is a hard one.
I know.
You know what? I think I would be a waffle with like strawberries on top and some whipped cream. Just fancy it up. That's what I think I'd be.
I like that. I think I would be a breakfast taco. I think I have a lot going on all the time.
I could see that.
My mind is just like everywhere. I think I'm a taco.
Oh, that's awesome.
Perfect. Well, now that we know a little bit more, or now that our listeners know a little bit more about us, we will get into this really awesome topic that Whitney came up with. And we're calling this topic Thinking of the Positives. So, Whitney, do you just want to kind of tell our listeners what is positive reinforcement, positive punishment, kind of the definitions of that if they don't know it?
Yeah, sure. So as I can try to think about a good way to put it here. So positive reinforcement, that's obviously like, say if something goes wrong somewhere and instead of kind of coming out with some kind of negative tone or, being kind of, I don't know how you would put it, bringing that negative space out, somehow in some sense. So that positive reinforcement kind of takes that away and brings a more encouraging kind of influence. So such as, for example, say a kid comes up to you and maybe calls you a name, like a really bad name or something. And instead of like, obviously, if you're talking to a kid, you're not going to want to call them anything either. It's kind of different, but just for example, and instead of yelling at them or screaming at them, maybe just kind of calmly talk to them like, hey, that's not okay. Let's not do that. So basically bringing in positivity while trying to encourage those different, good decisions rather than a negative mindset, basically. And then positive punishment, in a sense, would be like, for example, trying to think. So I'll kind of bring school up, for example. So maybe somebody wasn't getting their homework done for about a week straight now. So instead of coming off mean to them or saying, something to cause them to break down, maybe, in a sense. So maybe saying things like, hey, I've noticed you haven't been, keeping up with the work lately. Is everything okay? Is there anything I can do? Maybe we can come up with a scheduling system for you, or maybe just, maybe if you want help, maybe I can figure out a tutoring situation, coming up with those ways of bringing positivity into helping someone out, even though they're, not keeping up with what they're supposed to or whatever the case may be, and hopefully applying that punishment sense, but at the same time, kind of also that encouraging state of mind, I guess.
Yeah, of course. So essentially, it is still making sure that something happens in response to a behavior or an action or like even emotion, but in a positive way.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. And even with this kind of stuff, just making sure that there's a different outlet for them instead of the current one that they are maybe engaging in.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think you said that really well. Um,
I hope so. I was a little nervous.
you did great. With prevention, our listeners are probably wondering this. So how, kind of in a broad way, how does this apply to prevention work?
So, as we are prevention professionals, our main job is basically to encourage those good decisions, and making um, kind of bringing in some different strategies and stuff to lower the risks and harms within our communities. So we utilize those different strategies, to build positive outcomes, such as like enforcing those policies, giving resources, providing education, and of course, establishing those protective factors as well. So I think that just kind of plays a big part in how that could apply, for such as prevention aspect.
Yeah. And youth are so adaptable at their young age. And so making sure that they have the right tool belt, I guess, for life. And if they learn some positive reinforcement, it doesn't necessarily need to be us showing them or
Right.
enforcing positive reinforcement or positive punishment. They can show it to each other too, which I think is a really strong thing for youth in the community. I think we often think, oh, we're the ones that need to do this, but they're the ones that have the biggest voice and they're the ones that have the biggest influence on each other. So trying to teach them these ways so that they can help each other with these ways. If that makes any sense. Did that make
Yes,
sense?
no, that's perfect. No, I completely agree with you. I mean,
Yeah.
youth definitely they kind of have that power, but oftentimes they don't feel like they do. So that's kind of another reason why I brought up the topic of, thinking of the positives with that positive reinforcement, positive punishment type thing, because the youth they are a very important factor, especially within prevention, but also within our communities in general. And I think they do
Mhm.
deserve to have, that different side of things. So
Yeah,
yeah.
of course. So thinking about our substances, and specifically thinking about vaping, do you have kind of an example of this topic with vaping?
Yeah, of course. So vaping has been a pretty common risk among youth, obviously, and it seems to progress, as the years pass. And we're trying to come up with, different things to hopefully knock those out a little bit and to where it's not so bad. Well, I guess for example, in my service area, so they kind of thinking back on that positive reinforcement, positive punishment situation, vaping has progressed to the point where students are being caught vaping in schools. And that seems to be a problem, not just in my service area, but everywhere, in the world. So a few districts that I personally work with in my area have found a new tactic that could potentially reduce or stop students from vaping. And instead of basically taking the vapes from them and giving them ISS right away, they basically decided to take a more positive approach by providing educational materials about the harmful effects of vaping. Meanwhile, they're also supplying that safe environment and that safe space for the students so that they don't feel as though they're being kind of put on the spot or misunderstood or judged in any way. That can also be considered, that positive reinforcement, which then will drive the students to be able to do better for themselves by encouraging, that self-awareness and creating that protective barrier over what's most important, which is their health and their future. So not trying to get them in that mindset of, okay, it's not the vapes that is most important here. It's me. It's my health. What I'm going to do with my life. Not the vapes that possess those dangerous toxic chemicals. Which
Yeah.
otherwise that can also be known as like your positive punishment too. Having them think about these things. It really does
Yeah.
make a really huge difference how you acknowledge and reduce those problematic and reoccurring behaviors. So
Yeah. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that they know identity is so big in
yes.
especially teenage years. Kind of like 11 to 16, I would say. And so making sure they know that we're not trying to target them to say like, hey, you're doing a really bad thing. And because you do this really bad thing, like you're a horrible person. Just trying to make sure that we're telling them, hey, we care about you.
Hmm.
And we want to make sure that you're making the right decisions for yourself. And so putting that positive spin on it to just make sure they know, like, this is what vaping can do to your lungs. This is what it can do for your future. And just showing them that we're not here to destroy your life, even though it might seem like taking away vaping is destroying your life, because everything is also very dramatic when you're
Yes.
in that age range. And so just making sure they know at the end of the day, we are here to help you guys and not to take away, but to add healthy decision making skills. And I think that's really, it's all about perspective in all of
Hmm.
it. And when you're maybe a youth that is using, the perspective can be, well, why are they taking this away from me? But in reality, it is, yes, they are taking this away, but they're adding a lot more value to my life by showing me the right path. And so it is all about perspective. And when you're younger, it's super hard to see what adults are
Yes.
saying. And so that's why peer to peer interaction is so important. But yeah, yeah, that vaping example was super great. Um, so you mentioned that that's kind of an example for your service area. Is that the main substance in your service area?
No, definitely not. So vaping, even though it's one of the highest issues per se right now, there's also, marijuana, which seems to be a pretty big one. Of course, talking about tobacco in general, so nicotine, that could be like cigarettes, just whatever along that aspect. There's also, of course, e-cigs, which is basically the same as vaping, but they're a little different in different ways. So you
Yeah.
got e-cigarettes, and of course you got other types of things like pods, or you know such a maybe I guess another one could be like a, I don't know if you know what they are by chance, but like the little pins that are meant technically for CBD or marijuana or just whatever. There's
Yeah.
also those that have become a common issue. There's also fentanyl that has been a big discussion, and different opioids, other things. So there's um, a lot of different types of substances going on, and alcohol especially is another really big one, especially in my service area.
Yeah.
um, Especially with youth. Youth are getting a hold of a lot of these things, and that's one of the main reasons why we do this. It's why we come bring in these prevention strategies and bring these efforts out, trying to reduce that, those harms, especially with our youth, but not only the youth, but also adults, because it's harmful to
Mhm.
everybody. It can affect you one way or another, no matter what age group you are. But the fact of the matter is, youth are getting a hold of these things,
Yeah.
and it's become a big deal, and it's very scary, honestly.
It is. It is. And when you were talking about adults, that really made me think. So say a parent or a caregiver or just a caring adult in someone's life is trying to enact these positive reinforcement or positive punishment um, ideas, but they are users themselves. I know when I was initially kind of thinking through this when you were talking, that can be a really tough situation to be in. So the number one thing
Right.
I think for number one advice that I would have for caregivers or adults is kind of evaluate where you are in life. And if you're trying to tell someone younger than you that something is bad, or if you're doing positive reinforcement or positive punishment, that's amazing. But at the end of the day, they're going to see what you're actually doing in life.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, they're going to be influenced by that.
Yeah. And so I think it's really easy to kind of talk about, yeah, I found a vape in my kid's room and I talked to them about it, but I go around the house and I vape. And it's like, well, yes, you did great for positive reinforcement, but also it's about being a positive role model to them as well.
Right.
And so for adults, you brought up a great point. Even though we do target youth in most of our coalitions, it's really important for adults to stay healthy as well and to make the right decisions for ourselves, but also to be that positive role model for the younger people in our lives too.
Right. No, I completely agree. I mean, they look up to us, as we get older as well. It's everybody has a little bit of growing to do, so it's something to learn for everybody. But yes, I completely agree. I've actually just kind of on a personal aspect had a moment like that, when I was growing up, seeing, say, somebody in my family, for instance, drinking alcohol a lot. And so in a sense, it made me think in my mind, maybe it's okay, maybe it won't be so bad. They do it every day, all the time. So, I mean, obviously it can't harm me too bad, if they're able to do it, and it's like, just kind of thinking back on that is kind of why this positive reinforcement and positive punishment can work really well, not only for the youth, but for yourself. Because, you think about it and it's like, well, I can, tell myself like, this is bad, especially if I'm trying to tell, my kids, in the future, like, this is not okay, it can be very harmful to you. And I don't want them to look at me, and not really take that and soak that in, because if I'm doing the same thing I'm telling them not to do, it's like, it's going to be very confusing, and that's something you don't want to put that in their mindset either, to where they have to, double think about it, where they're just very confused and they don't know kind of what to think about it at that point. It's like 1 minute they might take it in like, okay, so it is bad. They have the education provided to me, but they're not stopping themselves. So it's like, is it really that bad?
Exactly. Yeah, it can become very confusing pretty quickly for them if they're being told one thing and then seeing something totally different.
Yeah, that support in that environment matters as well. So
yeah. Well, do you have any other examples or anything that you want to talk about on this topic? And then at the very end, I'll ask you for one statement, but I just wanted to see if you had anything before that one last statement.
I guess as far as I know, you kind of already beat me to my next example, which was to, not only apply it to the youth, but apply it to yourselves. So I just think that's a very important one to take in from this today. Other than that, I guess just kind of think about those positive actions. What can you do to actually help prevent youth, or anybody for that matter, to, be making these bad decisions, but trying to turn it around where they're not doing it anymore, or, just something. I mean, even when it comes to just simple arguments, like if you're trying to say, if your kid's misbehaving a lot, maybe they're being very argumentative, maybe it even has to do with social media or something. Maybe they are very attached to, games or phones, and maybe when you try to talk to them, they're not quite listening or wanting to listen, or maybe they throw tantrums when you take it away. Even in situations like that, it can be the same. It doesn't have to be just on a prevention aspect. It doesn't have to be just about substance use, things like that. But even in general, in your general life, to help these kids really look at you like you care, you got to have those positive actions, instead of coming unglued or, cursing them out, or just whatever the case may be. Bringing those positive actions can really help in whatever aspect you think about it. So I do think that's a very important takeaway from here today.
Yeah. And even if, I know our main focus is prevention, our only focus really is prevention.
Yes.
But for our listeners, if you're older, it's never too late to kind of reevaluate and stop if you're using a substance. Is never too late. In fact, it might be the perfect time to stop and become a little healthier. So it's, even though prevention and getting ahead of the cause is our main goal, we're here for the whole community, supporting everyone to make healthier choices and be the best versions of themselves possible. Even if you went maybe the wrong route a little in life, that's okay. What matters is getting back on the right route and making the best decisions for yourself. So yeah, cool. Well, if you could leave our listeners with just one statement, like a few words, what would it be?
Just be a positive role model. Honestly, I think that pretty much sums up what we talked about today. So
yeah,
I think that'd be a pretty big one.
I agree. That's a good one. Well, thank you so much, Whitney. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I really hope our listeners learned a lot from it. And if you are listening, please listen to the rest of our podcast, and we can't wait to give you another podcast. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and have a great day. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye. Thank you guys so much for tuning into our podcast. Remember to follow us on social media at PFH Prevention. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Spotify, and more podcasting platforms. And make sure to email us at moprevention@pfh.org with any questions, and feel free to call us at 660-627-7404. Thanks for joining us, and have a great day.